When they conceived of the series, they knew that they didn't want to lean on music. They wanted to use as little as possible. From 0 to 4 cues, there's a swelling, there's like a drony pad. It's usually in the trauma room. It's never in the heads of the patients, but it represents something the doctors and nurses feel. It basically means like, this patient could turn at any second. The next 30 seconds matter for if we're going to save a life. But they're very sparse. It's more clearly non-diegetic, so the audience isn't seeking to hang it on something and then failing it and hanging on something they see. It's like a great hot sauce. Just don't use too much.
This is Josh Apter from Filmmaker U, and I would like to welcome Bryan Parker from the Formosa Group and all places beyond and before and after that. You really have a pretty incredible resume and story. So thank you for joining us and telling us at least what we can fit in today.
Oh, thank you for having me on. I'm not sure how interesting my story is going to be, but I like to think that I've been a part of some pretty great stories.
Yeah, I mean, I was looking up your background and some of the inspiration that you have. I mean, you even wrote, I think this is your own bio, that you were like working, in audio since you were 14 years old, and you were like working with live music in Ohio and with bands through college. So it's like an interest in sound has been something that's, a lot of people don't have that through line. Their interests change, they develop certain things they like and decide what they don't like along the way. But it seems like you've really been interested in sort of like catching that sound for your entire adult life and then maybe even a little before then. So,
Yeah, I definitely remember taking telephones apart when I was like young, like in
mhm.
single digit age, um, for sure. And I definitely got kicked out of calculus class in high school because I was making some sounds. I was trying to perfect like the drop. I was trying to get that like the Cameron from Ferris Bueller's like raindrop sound just right, and Mr. Strobel kicked me into the hall.
And is there any relevance to some of the math that you might have missed in the industry that you find yourself in now, or was it a blessing in disguise?
Um, no, the math still interests me. I took a degree in electrical and computer engineering, and um, the communications and signal processing side of that has a lot of relevance in broadly has a lot of relevance in what I do now. I mean, I'm not like making custom windowed EQ plugins in my spare time, although don't rule it out. The signal processing, like knowing like what's going on sort of under the hood, is a little bit relevant, I think, in what we do with audio every day, but there isn't really a direct application of the stuff I missed that day in class, I don't think.
Okay, so you're making that sound. I can't do it. I can maybe do the a little pop, but
Also fun.
what interested you? Like, something must have gone from that little bit of, class clownery and to an interest in a career. I mean, were you just like, there's something about this riddle that I have to figure out, or is it just a passion to, like, you just loved, what was it?
I think that there was something interesting about there's a certain Wizard of Ozness of being the person that nobody's looking at a concert who's controlling all the things that are happening on stage, right? So when I was doing lights and sound, I'm like in the back in a dark booth, and I could ruin everyone's night if I wanted to. No, that's not good. It was there's something interesting that happens like 3 minutes, 5 minutes before house lights, um, at any show, whether it's for me, whether it's a jazz show in Youngstown, Ohio, or a rave at a warehouse under the Ambassador Bridge in Detroit, or some weird all-night multi-room event in DC that we did. You know, there's something really interesting where it's like all the prep work of soldering a snake together, designing a system in the first place, dialing the drive rack, like the crossovers and EQ for this particular room, for these particular speakers, for this particular type of music in this building right here. And then so all that prep work leads to house lights. And at house lights, the feeling that I get in the veins in my arm, like the adrenaline I get of like, how well prepared are you? What's the unexpected thing that's going to come up, and how well are you going to roll with it based on your prep work? There's a real high there. And I realize I've been chasing that high in different ways at most of my jobs since then. And for this one, for this job, for like a movie playback or episodic television playback each week, that showtime is when we press play for the showrunner on the show.
Okay.
Where it's like everything that I think that she or he may ask for in this episode of TV or in this movie or whatever, every sound thing that I could have prepared in my room or sent to my team to prepare and I review in my room should be prepped and ready to go before we get to the big expensive room. And so like the showtime of that is like, well, it doesn't. I learned early in my career it doesn't matter if you cut the dog paws, the ticky dog claws, the jingle of the collar, or whatever. If the only thing that the director was interested was the dog panting come downstairs, right? so you could either, and this comes to like there's a budgetary thing concern too, where it's like if there's enough budget, man, those movies get hosed down. Anything they could possibly ask for is ready to go. Even if we like edit them into place, make sure they're just right, and then mute them because we don't think they're necessary. They're ready to go if the money's back there. Like then the smaller the budget gets, then the more we're like, what does he really want? You know, or where's her focus going to be at this moment, and try and have those conversations early and earlier to make sure that we're presenting, you know.
But you say that doesn't change in the sense that like you're looking to find out what it is that the person is trying to get at, right? What are they trying to evoke, and use your skill to achieve that, you know? And so it's funny that you say like we do that when the budgets are smaller, but you're doing that regardless. It's just you have more tools in your toolbox with a larger budget to do so, and maybe you don't have to even be as disciplined in a weird way when there's more money, because you can just put it all in, hose it down, like you say, and then if they don't need it, it doesn't matter. But better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it, type of thing.
Yeah. So like, it's a funny thing where like the rhythm's really different on the movie side versus the TV side, where you make a picture, you make a film with a director, do a great job, figure out what they want, have a lot of meetings, a lot of reviews along the way, including having read the script. For my trusted clients who come back to me a lot, I'll read the scripts a year before they shoot, and I'll give sound notes ahead of time. Like, hey, can we, in this scene, could we actually see, is it okay with wardrobe department if we have her wear like cute hard-soled flats instead of sneakers in this scene, because this long hallway shot that you mentioned in the script here, I think it's going to work better if we can hear that from really far away, and we're going to be able to hear a hard-soled shoe from further away, be able to play that gag. I say gag, not sort of thing, but we're going to play that beat better if I can ask a favor of the wardrobe department and we put her in hard-soled shoes here. Or like, for this gag, let's not use a plastic kitty litter scoop. Let's use a metal one because it's going to be funnier for this beat. I'll give early notes like that to my returning clients that trust me a lot. Like, like I said, way before, way into pre-production. So, the rhythm is different. So films can have a longer arc like that. and then you have the time to prep things. They might want to go this way, might want to go that way, or in the temp, this was all music. There was nothing at all, but they just decided they actually want to have some sound effects and Foley support. Okay. Okay, we got that prepped. It's okay. We foresaw that this might be a possibility, so we have a little something, and I'll cut some ads real quickly, and we'll beef it up a little bit, and it'll be fun. But so you have a little bit more prep time there to get it right in film. But then it might be 3 years before they come back, and these days with the industry being as weird as it is, it might be even more than that, like years and years before they come back. And that's also a different project they're coming back with anyway. So it's not the same. The feedback loop is looser, right? On a television show, it's the same. It's episodes of the same piece of work. You sort of get in tune with what they want and what the show is and what the show wants, and make your suggestions for what you think would benefit the show most over the course of the first few episodes. And then your feedback loop is really tight, right? So then you're like, trust me, she doesn't want the dog collar. She wants the dog panting as it comes down the stairs. That's the thing that she finds most expressive. We're not going to go nuts getting the collar exactly perfectly in sync. You know, we might cut something in like loose or whatever, but put your focus here, put your focus here, put your focus here. And and that feedback loop week over week on an episodic is much stronger. You get clearer data much faster that way in the course of a television season.
So I saw that you did a lot of unscripted or reality early on.
Yeah.
Including, but not limited to, Trading Spaces and American Gladiators, which I love to see. But I see like also coming into Tim and Eric's Bedtime Stories in 2014, which I would imagine, because I only watched the series, the original series.
Awesome show, great job.
A lot of fun opportunities, because it's sort of like, I imagine maybe they are very specific in terms of what their sort of the language is and what they're interested in, but it does seem like there's a lot of sort of experimentation going on. At least maybe that's my projection because I love them, of what it is. Do you find that like working in that arena versus moving into scripted, it's like a different discipline, or is it sort of like two sides of the same coin?
There was a time when I was working the night shift, and I would get the call at 4 p.m. Hey, do you want to work tonight? Yes. I would work from 6 p. I would jump on the train downtown and go to Studio City. I would start working at 6 p.m. The show started mixing at 9 a.m. I would work for that 14 or 15 hours and only bill for whatever the budget was, 9 hours. And I did that for a couple of years, while the whole time I was like, there's got to be a way that this can go faster. And nobody else was around. It was just an exercise for me to go, like, where can I shave time? Like, how can I get the cursor from here to there, move the clips where I want them to go, know where the cursor is going to be next to set up the next thing I'm going to do. Like, became like combo moves in video games or something. And I was like, if I don't find a way to perform these 3,000 edits in a shift in 9 hours instead of 15, I'm going to throw myself off of my apartment building.
Well, or the client's not going to be ready for their mix.
Yeah, there were some spectacular failures there where I was moving too fast, and I remember one phone call that I got from a mixer, Tim Brown, R.I.P., that was like, why is there a bunch of production audio on my beeps tracks? Like, or I like cut something down to the wrong track, so like the television beep that's supposed to replace a fuck or shit or something. I accidentally had audio on that track, which is routed all separately, and I was like, I was last pass. It was 4 a.m. and So I'm very grateful for that time, because I learned to move around the Pro Tools interface.
I was going to ask if it was Pro Tools at that point. I mean, it was late enough in the game to be. It's funny. I remember I had a job cutting playoff jersey 1-800 buy this jersey commercials, and I was doing night shifts at Magno in Manhattan, but I had to cut all of them because they didn't know who was going to win. And the second the game was over, they were going to the one that, and Avid crashed hard at like 2:30 in the morning. I'm calling my friend who has this trying to get tech support. And it was like, it just had to be done by 9 in the morning, whether anyone was helping me or not. And it was like, they're exciting. I'm glad to have had those levels of crisis and pressure, but I'm really glad to not have them now.
I've not figured out a way to simulate that level of urgency with young editors that doesn't cost them something from their health, you know. And
Yeah.
I don't want any of those kids to have to work 15 hours and only paying for 9. I refuse to budget it that way. There's
Hmm.
no way I would ever subject someone to that. But I haven't actually come up with another way that they could feel that level of like, it's 2:30. The avid's going to take a nap now. Nobody cares. The winning team's package still has to be cut by 9 a.m. You know what I mean? Like, I'm
Yeah.
sure you felt that you felt that adrenaline in your veins
It was
too.
well, but it's a horrible feeling, but it's a great feeling because stakes are important. And so, I mean, look, you could fake some crisis for the purposes of teaching them a lesson, but that's not fair.
Yeah,
You know,
it's not really my style.
no,
I
but the
was
thing is, it'll happen. The thing is, at some point, it'll probably happen, and everybody will feel that feeling. And when this dust settles and you've dealt with it, you'll say, like, this was important.
yeah.
Don't forget how this felt.
Yeah, make sure you take a minute to breathe it in after you pull it off, and like marry like the pain of having to work that quickly with the feeling of having pulled it off. Like put those two things
Hmm.
together in your mind as remember them as one thing instead of separate things.
Right. So, taking that into account, because you're saying deadlines and overnights and things like that. But if you're working on something, I'm trying to segue into the pit in an articulate, crafty way.
You're doing great.
Yeah, it is a different, sort of like doing something live when you're saying like right before a show goes up, right, or when you're cutting against a deadline. I wonder the cadence of something like this seems much different. And of course, you've done it for a season. Well, you've done it for 2 seasons by this at this point. I'm assuming you're already done with
Yeah.
season 2. Like how does that, I guess it's a multiple part question because how do you find the right voice for the show? You're saying like, let's talk to the showrunners and the creators and really figure out what it is they're looking for. And then, how do you come up with a rhythm that works for the way HBO makes TV?
The EPs knew when they conceived of the series, I think pretty early on, they knew
Hmm.
that they didn't want to lean on music. That they wanted to use as little as possible. Somewhere from, you know, from 0 to, I don't know what our max is, number of cues per episode. From 0 to 4 cues per
Hmm.
episode. You know,
There's 4 cues of music per episode? No.
some of the more recent ones more like 2, but yeah. There's 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 score. There's very 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 subtle score, and if you didn't notice, then that means that the the ramp in mix wise was successful because
Yeah.
the last
Season 1 was more like when he's having his sort of crisis moments, remembering the pandemic, then it's like the world sort of turns upside down. But
yeah,
I'm not noticing as much in season 2.
there's a little bit less, but definitely there's a swelling. There's like a droney pad that comes in. Our composer Gavin Brivik does these. It's usually in the trauma rooms. It's like it represents. It's never in the heads of the patients, but it represents something that the doctors feel, the doctors and nurses feel, um, when they realize. It basically means like this patient could turn at any second. You know, if there's it projects the stakes of like the next 30 seconds matter for if we're going to save a life. It's basically what it means, what it signifies. But they're very sparse and somewhat rare, and some people don't notice them at all. There's a drone, and there's like like I said, droney pad and a pulse in there. So anyway, the EPs, everybody were all unified. You know, Scott Gemmell, John Wells, were all unified that they didn't want to use music as much as some other shows, and wanted to see how far back they could cut it, see how just how little. And leading up to episode one of season one, I built some conceptual like sound design things, like an exaggerated HVAC system with a low tone, a throb to it that we could still like plausibly attribute to sound in the room, or like some buzzing fluorescent lights that pitch away from each other and just make some dissonance. Again, it's just something we could plausibly say, oh, it's different pieces of equipment. You're right. And I feel like we went a few rounds with that before lock. I feel like we got fairly close, but Gavin's music does add something cleaner, that instead of a sound that you want to attribute to something on screen, it's more clearly non-diegetic, so the audience isn't seeking to hang it on something and then failing it and hanging on something they see. It's a little bit more its own thing.
Right.
It's definitely additive. I mean, it's like a great hot sauce. Just don't use too much.
But it's also like you could lose the HVAC or the fluorescence in the realism of them and not achieve the effect that you're going for anyway, right?
Yeah,
Like it's just
totally.
it's there's no way to have it emerge without it being something that pulls someone out to try to figure out.
Yeah, and like I said, we tried it a bunch of ways and a bunch of times. We went a few rounds with it. In episode one, like the degloved foot, like the double trauma, the woman who gets Minu, who gets pushed onto the train tracks, and the man who turns out to be the man who saved her. That sequence, we like went a few rounds, and I built a soundscape for it and sent it back, and a few back and forth. Actually, ended up being very, very helpful because the doors, particularly the 4 or 5 layers that go into the trauma bay doors, we refined in that time, and then already had decided what those doors sound like for the entire series while we were going back and forth on that one sequence, because there's a lot of in and outs.
And you are using similar stuff in season 2 as season 1. Like you establish it in season 1, and then it's
Yeah.
like it's sort of because it's like the vocabulary of sound effects that sort of your score is the place, the doors, the meat, the machinery. This like and so you have, I guess, in sort of at the edge of the realism, because you don't obviously want a heart monitor to do something it shouldn't be doing at the time where it should be doing it, or someone's going to say that's not what it sounds like. But that the soundscape is really made up of all of these very real things. I was listening to it specifically last night because I wasn't caught up, so I watched the most current episode.
You watched 213 last night?
Yeah.
Did you like my drill?
That one?
Yeah. Yeah, that's my Foley team taking a hand drill to a coconut.
Oh my God, that's awesome.
And so there's a dry layer, there's a wet layer, and then there's the ticking of the mechanism of the drill itself as a layer in there, and like getting just the right balance. If you'll hear it, the dry layer peeks out sometimes, and then the wet layer, like we weave them back and forth together. But when that dry layer cuts through, and just like a drill bit on the hard shell of a coconut, it's so good.
It's like that's the thing. It's really rough. The problem with it's me is like, as much as I was sitting there with a notebook trying to take notes, I get drawn into the show just like everybody else, which is what you want, right? You don't want me to be like sitting on the outside of it analyzing it. But yeah, I mean, I heard the sort of modulation of what you call it, the loop group, right? In the different spaces, because there's always some other sound and some commotion, and sort of was like, where does it match? Where does it not? They applaud when the monitors come back on, and I'm like, is that every single person clapping, or is that you guys creating like a whole orchestra of applause? That sort of stuff. And then of course the quiet moment where I forgot her name. The doctor who's going to be taking over for Robbie has another episode, and that's your sort of moment of silence, right? Because she gets lost. So you don't even have to have like the way you had the sound effect for Robbie's episode, her silence and lack, and maybe there is something in there and I didn't hear it, but like it just seems like that's a very conscious sound or lack of sound because it doesn't happen anywhere. It wouldn't really be silent, and yet she's lost in this. I don't even know what we don't know what she has yet. Hopefully we find out in the next 2 episodes.
Yes. Yeah, you're touching on something really interesting, was that sometimes we don't gain anything by adding a sound, but we gain a lot from taking it away later. So we will set up those moments. Yes, when Al Hashmi has another episode there in 213, the trauma room becomes significantly quieter than the trauma room, usually is or almost ever is. But it's because the audience is used to a certain amount of clatter in the background, a certain amount of like opening drawers and pulling out packages of equipment, a certain amount of knockabout, right?
Mm-hmm.
That moment can be affected. It doesn't need music. It doesn't need a dun 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 mystery. What's happening with Dr. Al Hashmi? It doesn't need that because we've established the sound and the simple lack of it, along with like a look at Robbie's face, is enough to signal to our audience like, doesn't seem quite right, does it? What do you think's going on there? And I love it when those things are as effective as they can be, like that. You're right that there's sort of an orchestra of sound. I mean, almost in whatever room we're in, there's layers and layers of the sounds that are specific to the central work area, the hub, like where Dana hangs out. And there's a very different mood in the north corridor, like up where they have more curtains than doors. It's where the peds room is, pediatric room, where Baby Jinjo's hanging out. Up there, that north area has a different mood. And so in our loop group sessions, we're like, oh, we're going north, so calm it down a little bit, like the register of everyone's voice just comes down a little bit. We go a little bit more sparse with it. It's not the same level of chaos as the central work area. South is sort of in between, because the south wing is very close to the hub. There's no walls between south and central, so it's sort of a mix between, but there's some distance, but no walls. And so when we're on one of those continuous camera shots and we follow Santos like from central to north or vice versa, instead of doing pass-bys, instead of doing some other conventional loop group stuff to convey motion, like a donut or whatever, which I usually don't like the sound of, I'll line up our loop group members and have some of them in the central hub mood and register, and some of them in the sparser and calmer north wing, and I'll move the mic past them, either on a stand. Tammy Treadwell at the Warner Brothers ADR has a really nice, completely quiet boom pole mic stand, and I'll stand there. I'll keep half an eye on the picture and just move the microphone past these individuals, tracking at about the same speed as the camera shot, so that we're, without the shuffling of feet, without the dynamics, without the vibe of two people passing by the microphone, they just stay where they are. And we, like the camera, are passing by these different conversations. Sometimes on the faster stuff, I'll take out a boom pole and swing the microphone like past their conversation as it happens, to create like a little bit of a, I mean, it's not so fast, you actually get like a pitch Doppler, but the volume of it, like off mic coloration, a little bit of reflection of the room, and swinging past the direct sound. I mean, I can do it right now. It's the swinging past the microphone in that kind of way.
Right. Do you do that multiple times if you don't kind of hear what you want to hear, or do you say, well, we can always sort of fix that, that sort of effect? Now you just do it again.
You just do it. Just like, I don't mind committing to tape. I'll record loop group off mic, record the futzed version through the walkie-talkie, get the moves, make sure the moves are right, get it. We're busy on the mix stage, you can fake a lot of stuff in post. That's true, and the prevailing attitude among a lot of people is to get everything as dry as possible and process it in the mix. But like that, those rooms are expensive, man. Like, we have a lot of choices to make already. I would rather like get the sound. I'm telling you, as the person who's going to have to answer for it, this is the right move. Commit it to tape, and then play it.
Right. You can say tape because you worked in tape when there was tape.
Yes.
Right.
Yes, I'm allowed.
Did you ever see there was an HBO, I think it was an HBO short about a Foley split screen of like some guy breaking in somewhere and escaping, and then on the other side of the split screen were the Foley artists doing all the sounds live. Do you remember this movie?
No,
Just
but
like
it sounds like a Mr. Show sketch.
it was so great. I mean, I'll never find it. And I used to watch. I don't know how I saw it. I didn't have HBO as a kid. My friend did, but it was so wild because they really made it look like one continuous act of the Foley artists while all of these edits were happening. It was very very cool. Um, but it's it's I don't know. It's just kind of awesome. I've watched a little bit of what you guys do. We know Eugene Garrity. I don't know if you know him. He's a guy based in the East Coast, and like he's done some stuff where we get to see this work, and same kind of thing. Like this was like this sound that was in this thing was actually his dog's collar that's in the robot in Hugo, and it's like you get an idea of what sounds like the right sound, and you kind of you can get it wherever you want. It doesn't matter what it is as long as it satisfies this.
Yeah, well, that's one of the more satisfying things, and that's one of the more rewarding things about working in sound is that because it's so you can imply a lot. I mean, you can state a fact too, like a gunshot's kind of a fact, but I had a boss who said like, well, sound or picture is fact and sound is emotion, right? So we have the ability to hint at something, go way more subtle, not just in the mix, but in the presentation of sound, lots of other ways too. The way something's recorded, the way we can have a performance that is very subtle and doesn't quite let the listener know exactly what it is, and we can have a bunch of articulations that get closer to what it is. We can imply a lot, and it comes up a ton in horror. You can leverage that in comedy for sure. A little bit less so in a realistic drama, but still, there's a certain amount of like, you don't see the thing, but we're gonna play the thing first, imply the thing, leading up to the shot of it, whether that be a pre-lap or something planted a couple scenes early. That aspect still really appeals to me, that we can, you can hide whatever, you can hide like a whale in a hinge squeak,
I got into sound designing at a point when things were just developing. I was really fascinated by the idea that dialogue, effects, music were all components of the soundtrack to a film, which had never occurred to me before. What gets me excited is coming up with sound ideas that do match picture, but also is not just the equivalent of what you're seeing on screen. I'm Eugene Garrity, and this is my course on sound design.
Have you ever hidden a whale in a hinge squeak, sir?
No, but I did have a poorly installed dishwasher that like rubbed against the cabinetry, and it sounded really creaky and twisty and ronky, and that became one of the main sounds that we used in the seasons that I cut of Whale Wars, for when the ships in the Southern Ocean were like over like on like stormy seas. I just slowed it down like a little tiny bit, and it's like this dishwasher
That's awesome.
door. And that's
right, but if it works, right? So like,
and then years later, another poorly installed dishwasher, the one upstairs at Formosa Group in Hollywood, had like a very different sound. I was like, man, that sounds crazy. That became one of the main elements in the main title, the main title logo sound in Mrs. Davis in 2022. I don't know if you ever saw that show.
No, it's so wild though.
If you have a pen, write it down. Mrs. Davis. It's about a nun fighting an AI in 2022. It's on Peacock.
Oh wait, I think I saw the. She's
Betty
not
Gilpin?
on a motorcycle or something.
She absolutely is on a motorcycle.
Yes, I saw the first episode of that, and my son rejected it. We're going to go back to it. We just finished watching Atlanta last night, so we're going back.
Your son's taste was not fully developed.
He was so young. I think maybe it was just too much for him. But I don't know. we have Hacks is coming out soon enough. We got like 4 days to find some filler. But you had said something I thought was also really, a couple things are interesting here, but human speech, the sort of musicality of human speech, and the expressive power of different automobiles or something.
Yeah.
But I think that's really, or vehicle engines.
Yeah.
It made me immediately think of whoever, I don't know who did Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad, but I think those people also had a real appreciation of engines and cars and what they said about the people in them, which I always love. I always love when you hear and maybe it's literal, but like you hear the thing that is the embodiment of the person and where they are. It's just like this extra sort of piece of detail.
Yeah, it's character work for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
That's Nick Forshager.
Okay.
Who does those shows? He's a true master. He is a living master.
Okay. That's maybe we'll talk to him, but you seem pretty good too, by the way. I'm gonna say, because he's gonna say the same thing about you.
We're out here. We try. We're out here trying, but there are a few living masters.
Mm-hmm. Well, it just seems like you guys are having a good time too. Like you're really, experimenting and sort of like finding that right thing. It's just like the mission that you're on in service of the stories you're telling is just great. I mean, it's like
it is interesting, and on the Pitt, I didn't know for the first couple of episodes in season 1, but I know now what it takes to make this show actually work really well, and for the emergency department to feel as busy as it does. It takes a manual recognition of everywhere you have an opportunity, and for us that is in the form of I make a guide track in Pro Tools. I'll take the guide track and use strip silence and fine tune the settings so that everywhere there's a gap in the dialogue of more than 6 frames, we have it marked as a potential place to put an off-camera background effect. We do have our top to tail, room tone, whatever background sounds, still like stereo background sounds from a library. Sure, fine. But what actually makes up most of the soundscape of the show is a bunch, like literally hundreds and hundreds of mono elements crammed into the gaps in the dialogue where they're not going to step on any of the dense jargon, where they're not going to step on any like difficult off mic or kind of just because it's a pretty noisy show, right? Like there's a lot of motion in the background. There's a lot of huge cast. Everybody's walking around. A lot of the noise on the show is like we're managing constantly. And dialogue intelligibility has to be number one, because even if we're talking about medical jargon that the average listener isn't going to understand the word, they're going to be able to track whether or not they're supposed to track that word. One of the genius parts of the show is that they will state the technical term for something and then usually cut to a reaction from a healthcare worker that gives the audience member some immediate feedback of how serious that is. And those two things are right next to each other. So that,
or they'll have someone explain it too, right? They'll ask them what to do.
Right after, we'll explain to a med student or something, or maybe a family member or someone nearby in more concrete terms. But it's the 1, 2, 3 thing where it's like jargon, reaction, explanation. I'm not a picture writer on the show, but I respect them a ton. I think they do an immaculate job on the show. So that the audience can tell, like, well, I don't know what that means, but Mohan thinks it's bad. and then like a family member hears the layperson's explanation, right? So, but we can't lose them for that time. If it sounded like, if the dialogue sounded all fucked up and they missed what it was, then you lose them for a few seconds before the explanation comes over. If they feel like they didn't understand what it was, if it's clear enough that it's some medical terminology, they can put that on a shelf and flow with it, right?
Right.
Dialogue intelligibility is just king. I mean, everywhere, but on this show especially. Right. So to that end, like I said, we mark up all the places where there's a gap that we can use to our advantage. And then we put our little off-camera stories in to coincide with those gaps. So while we were having a conversation in the hall between McKay and Javati, off to the right, you'll notice a few things happen in sequence. Hand sanitizer, door opens, door, maybe snap of couple latex gloves being grabbed, door closes. A couple minutes later, door opens, latex glove snap, glove thrown into trash can close. That all happens, and that's in like a labeled clip group that we can grab again and again. There's maybe 2, 3, 4 versions. That's not all exactly the same sound. But then we customize the timing of those things to move them into the gaps in the dialogue where someone takes a breath or someone's waiting on something, so that none of those things are happening right on top of a syllable or it's going to annoy somebody.
Right.
And that takes some time. That's a very different thing.
But those are the instruments in the orchestra too, right?
Exactly.
Like, it's not always just the leads on top that are sort of the dialogue. And by the way, even some of the times, it's like watching a foreign language film without subtitles. You just have to go by how they're saying what you get what they're saying. But and of course they'll explain it, but I don't even know how much you need. A lot of it is, as technical as it is, it really operates on emotion. And so, when Robbie and has sort of like a direct statement to somebody else, or who is it? They were talking to that guy, the new kid who has a breakdown outside because he lost the patient, didn't check the aorta, right? Those are real, genuine. Let's slow it down and have a moment between us where it's not like up here, but like you've got plenty of stuff up here where I don't know what the hell they're talking about, except that it's important, it's life or death, and they know what they're doing. I love that there's this thing where it's like the reputation of this place is kind of like third-rate hellhole, and yet they're all incredibly good at their jobs. And they're feeling the pressure this particular day. Of course, that's why we're here, because it's a shitty day, and it happens to be like these special days that we parachute in for the season. But they're really good at what they do, and they really care about what they do. And that has to come across in the dialogue you understand between people, that you kind of understand how they're speaking, but not necessarily what they are. All of that stuff is really precise. In addition to snapping gloves, Purell. Like, I love that you have like all. I thought, how much of this is Nat sound? None of it, I guess. Or if it is, you're laying on top of it.
Those particular hand sanitizers sound quite good. So we took a handful of recordings from set of those and labeled them and put them into our library, and we reused some of the better recordings of those actual hand sanitizers. Other than that, I mean, the heart rates, I don't know if you picked up on this, but the heart monitor, like if you go to a library, like a sound library for a EKG, you might search, you're going to have one at like 60 BPM, one at 90, and then 120, 140. Like, we don't use any of this. All the heart rates in our show are exactly what it shows on screen, which is exactly what the patient is scripted to have. If they wince in pain, the heart rate rises for a little bit and then takes a moment to settle back down. If something material changes about their condition that drives a change in the heart rate or blood pressure, then those alarms go on at the right moment. It's all like airtight, accurate to what's happening on the script and on the vision on the medical.
You have a doctor who's sort of, I mean, would they care if it wasn't dead on, or does it really have to be?
Oh, like, I've been roasted. I learned, like on episode 102 or 103 or something, I learned exactly what atrial fibrillation meant, because it was just something we hadn't. It's a totally different rhythm. It's irregularly irregular. So the number on the screen is like an average across the last, I don't know, 10 or 20 seconds or something of how many beats. It's approximation of the BPM, but it's not regular at all. And one of the best parts of working on the show is that Dr. Joe Sachs is at the spotting session for every episode with me and picture editor and our post producer Terry and Scott Gimmel, of course. And so if I have questions about a procedure or questions about like, well, would this affect this? Would the sound of this be changed by these conditions or whatever? I'll I'll sit next to Joe and we'll talk a bunch about the specifics there. And then Joe also comes to the mixed playback and lets me know if I got it right. On for Captain Morgan hip production or something, we talked about like the bend between like something like kind of sort of tendony, plucky, right? Or there's no bone snap to it, but there's a thunk, there's a bassy element to it that's just like bone on meat, Like we talk about that stuff, and then he comes in for playback, and we like play on the layers as we have the mix. And he's like, it needs more bass actually. When you reset somebody's hip, you really feel it. Like, all right, here we go, let's do it. And so he'll let us know if we got it right. And so we are really confident coming away from every playback, like, we got that to be as close to the experience of the healthcare workers as you can get across on speakers.
A great job. There was that one, the guy wouldn't take any meds to have his shoulder pop back in. Was it his shoulder or his elbow?
Elbow.
And I don't know if this is an editorial thing. Maybe you don't actually hear it, but you cut away and hear the scream through the corridors, or do you hear it too?
The way that it's cut, you hear the very start of the, plucky, ligamenty kind of sound. And then we cut away to a completely nonplussed Donnie, who's just like, like here's people wailing in the background for like most of his professional life. He's totally unfazed.
Right. Oh, I think it sounds like, I'm not there. It sounds like you guys are having a blast. I'm sure it's
calendar can be challenging, but we are having a lot of fun. And I get to like make a list, send it to Terry Murphy, our producer, and she sends a list of stuff to the props department. I roll through open props and just like I got a bag of goodies, right? And I get to drive over to my Foley team in Burbank and be like, hey, good news, I got you a chest tube kit and the neonatal ambu bag and whatever. I got you some cool stuff to make some cool sounds that are coming up in the next couple episodes.
Do you get a nebulizer for the kid who was having the attack last episode?
I'm going to confess something to you. I tried to get a nebulizer, but because that was after the show was pretty much wrapped. Like we were still working in post, but they weren't shooting anymore, so props was pretty much closing up. I was unable to get the actual nebulizer thing, so I will confess to you that we recorded that with an Arrowhead water bottle that I cut a hole into.
And no one ever knew until you just blew it.
I just there goes my Emmy.
Well, I'm sure they'll give it to you anyway. Even more so for making do with a water bottle.
We think of ourselves as a resourceful people.
No, you have to be. Well, I said I was going to take a half an hour. It's been like an hour, which is great. Didn't even get to the other one. I was going to talk about that because Bob Weir died this year, and you were on a documentary about him from like 12 years ago.
That was a cool show. The underwater sequence where they're like they're talking about going scuba diving. Bob and Jerry going scuba diving. I love that sequence. We did some cool underwater design, and that was a good score. And
I wonder if there's an uptick in streaming views of that since, but I will be watching that one. But also as a sound effects editor on Get Out, I remember I saw that movie without any prep. I didn't know anything about it. I dropped my kid off. He was doing some kid party thing, and I'm like, I'm going to walk to Union Square and whatever's playing. And it was that. And boy.
That's a great movie to go in cold, like Truman Show.
I was like blown out of my seat. I was one of 3 people in the theater. Yeah. Immediately took everybody else in my family. I was like, you gotta see, because like you think because it's comedy duo, was it Jordan Peele, right? Like you just didn't think, having seen his work, that it was going to be, well, that self-assured, number one, and confident, right? It was really like unbelievable. But then that's scary. It was really like, and funny. Such a weird, what a great effort.
Yeah, you wouldn't, if before I think of the world sort of like was familiar with that side of Jordan Peele, you wouldn't think that movie would reach as deep into you as it does, but it's quite a picture. I didn't do very much on that. My friend Trevor Gates was the supervising sound editor. He needs some help really late in the game, like after a tent mix or something, pushing towards the final. He needed some help and threw me out a couple things. I cut I cut the opening sequence. I did a little bit of sound design. Like when we see the really young Chris looking at the TV. There's some ethereal stuff back there that I contribute to, but I mostly just cut the opening scene where the brother stalks and kidnaps Andre. So like all the grappling,
the very yeah.
The grappling and the
right? That one.
Yes.
Yeah.
The grappling, leather jacket, feet dragging, that whole sequence. I cut that because it was one of those things where they had done a couple of temps and then was like, we got to finish this movie for this week. Like the final's gonna be done at the end of this week. Like just throw some bodies at it, and that was one of those bodies. But that was the Trevor Gates show. I loved it. I love working on that movie. But
no, that's great. Well, I hope we get to talk to you again because there's more to talk about, and this is really fun. So hopefully you'll come back. We'd love to have you. But I know that I'd rather leave people wanting more than less.
That's the whole game.
So, yep. And Jason's like, yeah, I'm gonna have to cut this thing in half for that to happen. But I'm sure we'll do fine. But seriously, thank you so much for giving us your time. Hopefully, we've given you still a little break before your heart out this afternoon was.
Yeah,
okay, great. And congratulations on a really terrific piece of work and a ton of great stuff that we touched a little bit on, but maybe we'll talk about even more next time.
Sounds good to me. This was really fun. Thank you.